Dan looks through his notebook, and I'll talk more about his notebook later, and he tells Desmond to tell himself to set the device to 2.342 and oscillating at 11 hertz. Notice the 23 and 42 in the number, two of the numbers, Hurley's numbers. Kimi comes busting through the door and tries to rip the phone away from him, but he's sent back to 96. In this next scene, it shows Desmond going to Oxford. I take it he got his 2-day leave because he's not with the army. As we know from before, Desmond was honorably discharged from the army. Could this be the reason why? Maybe because he was spacing out too much? He sees a long-haired and younger version of Dan, who doesn't believe Desmond. Desmond tells him the numbers that the present Dan told him to say, and that he knows about Eloise. And then the next scene is them in the classroom, and Daniel asks Desmond, wouldn't his future self remember this meeting? And Desmond says, oh, he probably just forgot, which is important, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. I find it funny that the next scene is when he's putting on the lead coat, and Desmond asks, why is there nothing for your head? And he goes kind of, oh. As we know, Daniel says if you're exposed to a large amount of radiation, that there probably can be some side effects, and this is why he's probably having trouble remembering the cards in episode 4. Eloise turns out to be Dan's test rat, and we learn from the Eloise scene that the conscience can be transported through time, and that Daniel has a device that can do it. The device that Dan has is definitely electromagnetic. The apron he puts on is something similar to what you would wear when you go to a dentist office, when you're getting x-rays. It would seem that the device that Dan has would probably emit like a high-frequency electromagnetic radiation, like UV rays or x-rays. When Dan blasts Eloise with the radiation to unstick her in time, we see something similar to like what we saw with Desmond when he uses the failsafe key at the end of season 2. In both cases, there was like a loud noise and a purple color. And also remember, after the incident, Desmond could also know what would happen, similar to this situation. Is Desmond going to visit Daniel? What compelled Daniel to go to the island in the first place? When he's watching the TV in episode 2, was that why he was crying when he saw the news report about the plane crash, because he knew it would already it was going to happen and did nothing? Or maybe he tried to stop it and couldn't because he couldn't change the future, as he already said. Look at Dan's chalkboard. It's of course all about time travel. It has notes about like time cone theory, like as you can see, like relative quantum mechanics, and there's a note about time sloshing. It also says Kerr might work. Kerr was a scientist who dealt with time traveling through black holes. We see a little bit later that Eloise dies, and Desmond gets freaked out because he thinks that's going to happen to him too. Dan tells us that she dies because her brain probably short-circuited, that she kept jumping in time and couldn't tell which one was reality, that there was no anchor to tell one from the other, something that is familiar in both times. Dan says to Desmond, you need a constant, something or someone that you care really, really deeply about, that exists both in 1996 and 2004. And who would have thought? Of course, it is Penny. We go back to the boat, and George tells Desmond that they were under very, very strict orders not to answer a phone call from Penny, as she would try to get in contact with the boat every so often. This is also the first time that the 1996 Desmond looks at himself as 2004 Desmond. And George makes a comment about looking a lot older now. They look and see that the door was opened, and George says it looks like you have a friend on this boat. A little bit earlier, George tells us that he used to work in the radio communications room in the boat, and I got sabotaged, and I think it's pretty safe to assume that that person is Ben's man on the boat, and then he's also the one that just opened the door for them. Desmond time skips once again, and this time he makes his way to an auction house, and you can see a picture of the Black Rock, the ship that's on the island, and you hear the auctioneer saying that apparently what happened is the ship was lost at sea on a trading mission, and 7 years later a journal from the first mate of the Black Rock was found in Madagascar. The journal was supposedly found among the artifacts of the pirates. According to Lostpedia, the first mate of the Black Rock was Actually, his name was Widmore, which I thought was pretty interesting, but not sure how accurate that really is. The auctioneer says that the owner of the journal is Tovard Hanso, and without a doubt related to Alvar Hanso. But why on earth would he sell it? Also, the lot number of the journal is 2342, which, as we know, are two of Hurley's numbers, 2342, and also the numbers that Dan tells Desmond to give himself, 2.342. It turns out that Widmore, Penny's dad, was the one betting on the diary. He's just there for that item, as right after he wins, he leaves the auction. It's weird, too. Remember back in Season 3 when Desmond's talking to Widmore, how hostile he is towards him? This episode, when Widmore gives Desmond Penny's address, he seems pretty nice to him and like he wants him to see her. Somehow he knows what's going on. Now in the bathroom, why didn't Widmore turn off the faucet? It was odd because they focus a decent amount of time on it. There are a few reasons I think that he would leave it on. He's either just a really old germ freak, or he doesn't want to leave fingerprints on the faucet, or he thinks Desmond's just below him and expects him to turn it off, or he purposely left it on knowing it might trigger something with Desmond. Somehow he knows about what's happening. But more than likely it was just a method used to show us how much time has passed between the different time jumpings. I ultimately think that Charles Widmore is the one that's after Ben, that he probably sent the freighter to the island, and that he wants the island for some personal gain. I think he sponsored the boat race around the world that Desmond was in, just so he could find the island, and being as powerful as he is, he probably sent all the boats on a course where he thought the island would be. And I also think Penny has been using her father's resources to find the island. All the wires are cut, probably by Ben's man on the boat. And I think the funniest line of the whole show was when Desmond and Saeed looked at all the several hundred wires that were cut and asked Saeed if he can fix it. Saeed says, "I'll need a minute." What kind of things are they teaching them at the Republican Guard? Is it like downloaded into their brains like the Matrix? Ultimately, George Minkowski can't handle it anymore and ends up dying. Now look at this calendar that Desmond sees. I definitely think that there's a reason for all the different color markings on the calendar. It doesn't really strike me as normal to have like 4 or 5 different colors just by chance. I think it also means that the boat has been sitting out there the entire time. Normally people don't X out dates on a calendar unless like counting down to something or keeping track of how many days have gone by. Maybe the only way they can keep track of time is by counting the sunsets and checking it off on the calendar because of the clock times that are wrong or inaccurate.